Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Three Off the Tee podcast. Harry and I are delighted to have you back with us for episode 78. Making his third appearance on the pod is a great friend of ours, my fellow Dacia man, Seamus Power. Seamus, on your first appearance on the pod in mid-July 2020, you were 276th in the world. On your second appearance, you had just won your first PGA Tour title, the Barbasol Championship, and risen to 113th in the world. Today, you're 29th in the world. I've won your second PGA Tour title, the Waterford Bermuda Championship, and are leading the race to the FedEx Cup. How much has your appearances on this show contributed to your success, sir?
I'd say it must be at least 75% of it, I'd say.
Well, surely we should be on the Seamus Power payroll now or something at this stage, Harry. What do you think?
Well, as I said to you in a text earlier, Ian, on that kind of trajectory, I'd be expecting top 5 in the world by about the 1st of June, I'd say.
June, yeah.
Jamie, huge thanks for coming on again. It's great to see you on the screen in front of us. You're out in Vegas, which is, I can tell you, in Royal Carlo here, it's probably a lot warmer in Vegas than it is at 4 o'clock in the evening here in Carlo. We're in the middle of a bit of a freeze for the next 4 or 5 days here in Ireland. But look, it's dry, but it's very, very cold. There's not a golf course in the country open today, I'd say. But let me start off by saying we had another iconic Irish golfer on the podcast again with us last week, Pádraig Harrington. And if I just dive straight into something he said with reference to you, which I thought was brilliant, he referenced back to the time, obviously, he played in Rio in 2016. And he said he'd known who you were, but hadn't spent maybe a huge amount of time with you up until that week. And he said, wow, I have to say, I was really impressed with the guy. He had the game. You could see he had it about him. But he said maybe the one thing that he lacked was the belief or the trust in himself. And he said it's amazing and brilliant to see him move on from that time. Yes, it's 6 years ago, but I just thought it was an interesting opinion from arguably Ireland's greatest ever sportsman, or he's up there with Rory, I suppose, as in majors and all the rest. But what do you think of that comment, I suppose, of that time? And when you look back in 2016, I suppose, how you've developed, and I'm not just talking about wins and whatever, but you must look back even to that with great fondness, but also from what Harrington said.
Yeah, no, it was, I learned a lot that week from Pádraig. Anyone who's been around him, he's fascinating to talk to. He's, one of the smarter golfers you'll ever come across. He's very kind of self-aware, but he's very good at analyzing your own, other people's game too. So I remember at the time I heard him say that, around that time, that same comment. And when I was at the time, 6 years ago, you don't realize it, I guess. Looking back now, he was definitely right, kind of thing. But in the moment, it's not as if you're walking around knowing that you're not believing in yourself, kind of thing. So it's interesting looking back now. It was one of those things. It's tough though. As anyone, even if you don't believe in yourself, it's hard to just turn around and say, look, I'm going to start believing in myself. You sometimes need something to believe in. And so it's, for me, I said, I've kind of realized that over the last few years, my kind of career, you kind of realize that everyone is born so differently. And especially when it comes to golf, guys are mature at different times in terms of just golf. Their game kind of comes together at certain times. And even something like that, their belief, comes at different times. I think that's the amazing thing to me with, obviously Rory's an example from Ireland, but even some of the other guys have come out of college in the last few years and have gone straight into Colin Morikawa, he lives near in Vegas with me, and he comes out of college and he's already has the belief to be one of the top golfers in the world almost overnight, and stuff like that it's easy to dismiss that, oh, he's just got a lot of talent. But I can tell you from my own experience, if you put me in whatever it was, the last group of the Open or near the lead in the PGA in those situations at 22 or 3, whatever age he was when he won those, there's no way you have the belief or no way you're ready to perform the way you need to perform, no matter what your talent level is. So it's just amazing. I saw that with Rory at a young age too. I mean, at 8 or 7, to be honest, he was probably had at 15, but when he turned pro, and you just see him in situations having just utter belief in himself. And I'm obviously one of those ones, I wish I maybe would have formed that a little bit earlier, maybe worked on a little bit more at an earlier age, but it's definitely changed in the last few years, and it's obviously shown the results. It's such a big thing in golf. people ask me all the time, if it's their kid or someone they know, do you think he's going to make it? And it's like, I don't have that. I don't have the magic wand to say what kind of belief is there, going through transition in your swing and that whatever, like whatever seconds, your mind can do 10 different things in that time. And, for me back in 16, I probably was worried about all sorts of stuff through that transition. Whereas now it's just much more kind of single-minded and much more confidence and belief in what I'm doing.
Yeah, great answer. Funny, we threw out a bit of a poll on social media yesterday, and in fairness, we got a super reaction from people with loads of questions. Obviously, we've tried to kind of handpick it, just a few, but one guy, a guy from Waterford, actually, he was in Mount Juliet caddying in the Pro-Am this year, and his team, he was caddying for John O'Shea, actually, fellow Waterford man, and they were in the Hunter's Yard afterwards, having a beer, celebrating their team. Actually won the Pro-Am. I think Robbie Keane was on that team, and they played with Alvaro Quiros. But this guy's a good pal of mine. He's from Waterford, and he commented that he went out to make a phone call in the Hunter's Yard, and yourself and your partner were kind of walking towards him. So he cut his call very quickly because he wanted to say hello to a fellow Dacia man. And he said, like, he kind of introduced himself, and he kind of said a couple of stories of familiarity about Waterford. But he said to me, look, he said, you might just ask him, he said, with reference to what Pádraig said on this podcast last week, and I suppose you wind it on very quickly and you establish yourself on tour then over those coming years. We now talk to you as a two-time winner. In his mind, and this is where the amateur golfer loves to ask these questions, the focus now up at that lofty inside the top 30 of the world rankings probably now focuses to really being focused on majors. And we see the performance you did in the 3 of the 4 majors there last year, with some fantastic finishes for a guy that had his first full season of playing in majors. But his question was, and he felt that, do you now have a specific focus on majors next year? Is there any one in particular, having played all 4, that you think, God, I could really compete here when I come back next year? Obviously, we know Augusta's the only one that stays in the same place. But, I'm sure you're probably going to say, look, where you are now, you can compete in all 4 of them. But was there any challenge, be it a US Open or an Open Championship, that you kind of said, you know what, I'd like another crack at this next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say pretty much nearly all of them, to be honest. But I definitely like the setup for like the PGA and the US Open, the tougher setup where, guys weren't shooting like crazy low scores, and you were just able to. I've always had a good, whatever you'd call it, like I've always had a good ability to kind of hang in there on tough courses. Even my game isn't there just to really like battle out some pars and maybe the odd birdie kind of thing. So I really like that challenge on both the PGA and US Open. The Masters was fantastic. I mean, that's one I think no matter how many times you played, you just want another crack at it straight away. We played in a lot of wind this year, which I think was a little unusual. But it's one of the more fun golf courses I've ever played. Obviously everyone knows it's in immaculate condition, but it's just such a good layout. I don't know, it's one of those courses that made so much sense to me, that it's very cleverly designed. It wants to lure you into taking on aggressive shots, but knowing that there's a huge risk if you don't execute it. I remember at Simon, I said a couple of times, never in my life have I had so many high risk like chip shots, where literally you're hitting a chip shot knowing that if you don't execute or you don't land, hit a pretty good shot, it's either back to your feet or it's gone down another slope and you're going to have an equally difficult shot from somewhere else. So I love the challenge of that. So really looking forward to getting back there. Obviously, they're all going to be new courses this year. But the Open is on a golf course I played before and I absolutely love, in Liverpool. The majors are different. Obviously, this was my first year playing them, and when you're at them, the whole vibe, the whole atmosphere is just completely different, and it's so fun to be a part of them. You're just dying to get back. But I don't know if I've like changed my whole, routines or perspective on all the other tournaments. I realize how lucky I am to play in the events I am. So, I mean, starting right in January, you're going to be trying to get another win, no matter where it's going to be. But obviously, I feel like the majors, maybe in the build up, maybe a month out, you're going to start working on some particular shots that you need or might think you need. I think that's where the major thing for me is a little bit different. Whereas, all the other events, you kind of just go in and you play your game. Whereas, it's like Augusta is an easy example. Everyone knows the course, but you want to have that like a couple of shots practiced that, you know, you don't use that often. You know, I know 13 is going to be different this year, but that's a perfect example. I mean, it's a very particular, like, kind of, you know, hard drawing shot around that corner. And you've got a few of those out there where you want to make sure that you're comfortable hitting in advance. And then obviously the big one in Augusta is going to be the short game. You know, you're going to probably do some extra short game practice coming into it. So